And we have a special disclaimer from Pet Partners. For terms and conditions, visit www.petpartners.com/sample-policies. Products are underwritten by Independence American Insurance Company, NAIC 26581, and produced by Pet Partners, Inc., NPN number 7612549, CA license 0F27261, PPI Pet Insurance Agency, Inc.
Things have changed. People want to have their pets with them where they live, work, and play. And society is beginning to recognize that and to accommodate that.
Hey, it's Nikki, Llewellyn Gregory, and you're on Gut Plus Science. You're in for a fast-paced, storytelling, action item-rich leadership growth experience. I hope you make this podcast a habit. I consider it a leadership mentoring tool. Learning together makes us better together, and that is how we change the world around us. Let's get to it.
It's Nikki, and I'm back for our special Pets at Work series with my sidekick, Michelle Yates from Pet Partners. And today we're talking about how pet-friendly workplaces are boosting mental health. And we have a great guest with us today, too. So you can plan to pick up new ideas for integrating pets in your workplace to level up your culture and help your people live healthier, more fulfilled lives, not just 9 to 5, but letting that so-called 9 to 5 make human lives better. So excited about this. Michelle, I think I want to turn it over to you to introduce Steve, because I just met Steve through you, and I know you have a long partnership there. So I'd love for you to share about our guest today.
Yes, thank you. I'm as excited as you are. Thank you for letting me bring Steve into the fold. Steve Feldman is the president of the Human Animal Bond Research Institute. We will be calling it HABRI throughout the conversation because Human Animal Bond Research is a mouthful. But we've worked with Steve for many, many years, and I'm not going to take his shine away and let him talk about the awesome mission and the research that HABRI is doing to raise awareness on the human-animal bond and all the benefits of pet ownership. So really excited to have Steve here with me today.
Amazing. Well, welcome, Steve. I would love to dive into learning more about HABRI. Thank you so much for helping us with that acronym, so I didn't have to do the mouthful the whole time. But I'd love for you to share a little bit about the background and help us understand HABRI. And then I know you've got a lot of evidence-based research and knowledge to help set the stage for us as we go into this conversation today. So we're turning it over to you. Welcome.
Nikki, Michelle, thank you so much for having me on. And I am excited to talk with you about this topic. So the Human Animal Bond Research Institute, HABRI, is a nonprofit organization, and we conduct research on the human health benefits of pets. Now, already know that the majority of your listeners have pets because the majority of Americans have pets. And most of you listening know how great your pet makes you feel. Well, I'm here to tell you that there's some science behind it, and that's what we do. So when it comes to our mental health, our physical health, and our social health, we can actually document the scientifically proven health benefits of having pets in our lives. And obviously, this could very much extend into the workplace.
Well, our company at People Forward Network, we are huge pet advocates. I don't know if you happen to check out that we have a marketing team, and all of the dogs have titles and roles. We also have an operations team for all of the cats, along with our team members. We are so passionate. So the more research to help us even go deeper on our team with incorporating pets, but we want to just extend out that inspiration to more leaders, particularly those that think the only way to bring pets at work is like they're sitting by you in the office greeting clients. And it's like, maybe for some, but a lot, no. And no matter if you're a remote, hybrid, whatever, let's just really dive into more of that research around what you found. So I know, Michelle, you've done some partnership with HABRI on some research. I don't know, where we want to kick off, maybe with the project that you've done together. Or Steve, is there any other maybe research you wanted to share with us before we talk about that collaborative effort?
Well, I notice how you're smiling when you're talking about pets. And there's actually a reason for that. When we interact with pets, and sometimes when we even just think about our pets, there's something going on with our brains. Our oxytocin levels go up. This is also known as the love hormone. Our cortisol levels go down. That's our stress hormone. So there are actual chemical changes, positive changes that are going on in our brains when we're interacting and even just thinking about our pets.
Drug-free, I might add.
I know last episode, Michelle was talking about, her husband's a firefighter. And in that realm, there was some statistics or feedback on, what is it that, these animals do to make life better? And it was real simple. It was like, they just make it better, like period, straightforward. So it's been fun just in different industries to talk about how everyone, really does that oxytocin and things that really drive happier experiences for us as humans. That's so real. And I think, Michelle, you all collaborated with HABRI for a research project, and I want to break down some of that information. So I'm going to turn it over to you for that.
We did. It's pretty hard to go in and try and convince employers to think differently about having dogs in the office. And I'll do air quotes on that because it doesn't necessarily mean that you have a physical dog in the office. You can make a pet-friendly work environment. So I loved it. As I mentioned at the start of the show, I loved the work that Steve and team were doing. And I said, let's do some research together around the worksite environment and let's survey HR professionals specifically and kind of talk through some of the questions that we had to back some research up with all the benefits that we know in our hearts, but we need to put some data behind it. So we surveyed HR professionals and found that 95% said they do whatever they could to ensure their pet's healthy life. And even more striking, 90% of senior HR leaders said they'd spend whatever it takes on veterinarian care. But there's a disconnect there. So while 90% of the HR professionals are pet owners and many of them pet obsessed, I might add, they estimate only less than half of employees have a pet. And that shows a major underestimation of pet interest. I think about the psychological phenomenon called pluralistic ignorance, where individuals believe that the majority of other individuals hold different views than their own. So I think, Nikki, I'm obsessed with pets, but is everyone as pet obsessed as me? And the data shows yes. And Steve and team have done a great job, not only putting research together to talk about that, but all the benefits, employee morale, employee engagement, employee productivity, employee connection and bonding, all through having a pet-friendly workplace and incorporating pets into the conversation.
Yes. I shared that our team is pretty pet obsessed, but not everyone on the team has a pet. But those that don't, they are just as engaged in the channels that we've created in our digital communications. They're asking for, like, what's Cardi doing today? Hey, is Ella over there shredding paper today? Like, how much? Like, people are very engaged, even if they don't have pets. It's like the light of our Slack channels and our community platforms. So I can attest from that from our team. But Steve, what are you seeing around your experience working with HR leaders and their feedback on adding pet benefits, or the ones that have, what's working? Share a little bit more from your seat.
Well, I think, as Michelle said, it's there's a little bit of a hesitancy to have these conversations. Like, is this a serious topic? And do people love pets as much as I do? So we found that these HR leaders love pets. They've even seen firsthand in their employee groups the benefits that pets have for their employees. But there's something happening. They're not having the conversations amongst the senior leadership about pet benefits. So more of the employees are going to have pets than kids. This has always been true, right? There are more pets out there than kids. And in all of our surveys, more than 95% say pets are family. So if you really want to be a family-friendly company, you have to think about those four-legged family members. And that starts with pet inclusive benefits that comes with acknowledging that people have pets. And if you can bring them into the workplace, some amazing things happen in terms of collaboration, cross-team collaboration, problem solving, and employee morale.
I'm a big proponent of data being an alignment tool. When we see the numbers, we understand the true data and research. It helps us to maybe see something different. Maybe we're struggling as a team, but then we've got the feedback from our clients and we're like, this is what it is. And so we need to dig in and it helps us to align. So for many of the leaders out there that struggle with, I don't even know if struggle with is the right word, for leaders that just are not prioritizing this or they're pushing back, besides bringing data to the table to say, let's look at the numbers, right, on what really matters to people. How do we approach leaders to make this a priority, to see it as a need? I'm sure bringing more data in. Let's keep doing that. But what are the other ways, or how do we have these conversations in more meaningful ways that can maybe shift a mindset?
Well, it is important to bring that data to the table. And I would start with not just because this is the research we do, but it's a good starting point for the conversation, that there's good science to show that pets are good for our mental and physical health. Even before the pandemic, we had a loneliness crisis in America. People are still lonely and socially isolated. This is true if you're involved in remote work, which still continues sometimes. So we can show that pets actually help connect people. And that's super important for mental health. In fact, we can also show that employees with pets exercise more. So if you want a healthy employee group, you can point to the science that says pet ownership is something that should be encouraged. And then you think, okay, a lot of our employees have pets. Pets are good for them. How do we make sure that we help take care of them? So you could start with something super simple, like bringing on pet insurance as a benefit. And then you can think of other ways that you can express care and concern for those four-legged family members. But there's data behind all of this.
And Steve, you had talked, and something that I find, and I think it's coming up in a couple months, you're doing a lot of work with Capitol Hill. Maybe you can share some of those stories with us.
Well, interestingly enough, Capitol Hill is one of the most pet-friendly workplaces there is. When you go around the halls of Congress, there are office dogs everywhere. Sometimes they're the member of Congress's pet or a staff member's pet. And by the way, pets are completely bipartisan. One of the few things that actually brings everybody together on Capitol Hill. So they're actually ahead of the game when it comes to pet-friendly workplaces. And there's even legislation now being considered to help make it a little easier for us to care for our pets. It's called the People and Animals Wellbeing Act, the PAW Act. And what it would do would be allow us to use our flexible spending accounts and health savings accounts to actually cover veterinary care or a pet health insurance policy. So this is pending in Congress. It's HR 1842, and we want to encourage our members of Congress to support this legislation, which will make it much easier for people who have health savings accounts, who have flexible spending accounts, to use a little bit of that money to make sure their pets are healthy too.
So we talked about data being an alignment opportunity, and then you positioned a couple of different ways of thinking around, caring for our health, and how statistically, when we've got pets in our lives, we're probably taking more breaks, like we're moving our body more. That helps us to be more productive at work. Let's talk about, for the leaders that maybe aren't embracing this, or there's some pushback, there's some that think of pets as a distraction. So I love that you talk like Capitol Hill. You see, pets running around just to see that visual. That's so cool. But for some that aren't embracing it like that because they think it's a distraction, how do you reply?
Well, that's a common misconception. People imagine that pets would be a distraction, but they're actually not. First of all, if you're going to have pets in the workplace, there's a lot of folks who have done this. So there are really good policies and procedures in place. You don't have to invent those things. And when you put a good plan in place so that everybody is safe and happy with pets at work, some amazing things happen. People might come to visit the pet, but then they're going to collaborate on a problem. They're going to get away from their screens. They're actually going to work together. And there are several scientific studies to show that cross-team collaboration increases, problem solving increases when there are pets in the workplace.
And I think it can really disarm too. I've seen this. We're very pet forward, obviously, like you, Nikki. And conversations can get a little heated sometimes around the boardroom. And we were struggling with a problem and we were having a difference of opinion. And the next thing you know, our little mascot, Theo, came and he put his head on one of our laps. And we're just like, okay, it looks like Theo sides with him. Maybe we should listen to what Rob has to say over there. So it can really diffuse the situation, I would say, too.
I will share. I have a friend named Vince who he is a big Great Dane lover. I love all dogs, but Great Danes are at the top of my list of kinds. I just am so intrigued by them. And he has a new Great Dane, Judah, who is just a little under 1 year old. And Judah comes to work with him. And I'm like always looking for any excuse to have a meeting with Vince. Vince is in marketing. He's there to grow the business. So just from like a case of like, I'm a pretty efficient person, like not trying to have extra meetings on my calendar, but I do make excuses to go see Vince more as long as Judah's going to be there. And if Judah's not going to be there, I'm like, we'll find another day because I want to make sure that I'm hanging with Judah. So there's, number of, attractive opportunities as well, just in relationship building, I think. And, relationship building from maybe business development and our company brands, sometimes that can be the case. But, Michelle and I have talked about, the relationships that happen because of pets at work, conversations you would have never had. I mean, half the time I'm out walking on our trail that's very popular in Indianapolis, and I'm talking to the dog before the human, and then it helps me to start the conversation with the person. So much power in, that relationship building side. Is there anything that, Steve, you'd like to chime in on there?
Well, it turns out that pets actually connect us to other people. They provide direct companionship, but people, and actually this is an outside the workplace example, but I think it applies. Neighborhoods with more pets are actually more close knit. You meet the pets in your neighborhood, you become friends, you do things for each other, you're even more civically engaged when there are more pets in a neighborhood. And so you can take those same findings and apply it to the workplace. People are more connected to the mission and connected to each other.
I have a neighbor that I'm like, I know Duke's dad. I know the dog's name. I don't
Right.
know
Not the neighbor's name. You'll get there.
Yeah. Let's talk about the future of pet benefits. I'd love, both of you to chime in on what are we seeing trends wise, particularly helping leaders that are wanting to build more highly connected cultures, those that attract new employees, and just, really a culture that is helping people have meaningful work experiences. Where does pet benefits fit into the future looking ahead?
I think it's starting to take some momentum. I love what Steve had said. There are more pets than children, and there are many, many employees out there that are looking for pet benefits. It can be quite costly to be the best pet parent, to really take care of that companion, that furry companion that you have. So what we're finding over the last 10 years is the conversations had shifted, and they're calling pets, or they're viewing, they meaning the employees, are viewing pets like dependents now. And so Steve had mentioned the PAWS Act, really serious consideration around the health and well-being of the pet, because it can cause a lot of not only emotional duress if your pet is sick or injured, but financial uncertainty, which causes a whole nother slew of mental issues. So really, pet insurance is a start, but we know many organizations, they have pet bereavement options. They have pet concierge services that we've talked about before. That's a great way to get people back into the office, because the number one reason, when surveyed on a lot of the companies that we work with, why are you hesitant to come back into the office a couple of days a week? And they're like, I'm worried about my pet at home. My dog or cat has been used to me being with them. They're my companion in my home office. Who's going to walk them? Who's going to make sure they get fed? So there are some employers that are implementing that. Paternity, which I think is a great one, trying to acclimate a new pet, whether a puppy or an adopted pet, takes some work, and you have to set some foundational time there. And we talked about the employees are going to be distracted anyways if the pet is sick or injured. So let's give them some space and some time. They'll be far more productive, far more engaged, and far more loyal, frankly, to a company than if you are not paying attention to the human-animal bond.
Well, I'll just add that when we were just sort of coming out of the pandemic and things were opening up, I had a reporter ask me, well, what's going to happen now that we have to leave our pets behind? And I said, what makes you think we're going to leave them behind? We all got so used to having our pets by our side, and they got used to us being there too. And things have changed. People want to have their pets with them where they live, work, and play. And society is beginning to recognize that and to accommodate that.
So I've shared a couple of stories of what's happening in my company, People Forward Network. And a big reason why we've partnered with Pet Partners is because I know how much it does for our people and how much joy we have around this. And I wanted to really bring the research to this to help more leaders build these engaged workplaces, just believing that pets can do that, right? And then bringing this research alongside and the long-standing, best practices that Pet Partners has seen. It's like, oh my gosh, this is so much more than even what I thought it could be. And we've still got lots more to talk about. Let's hear some of your favorite stories. And I'll start with you, Steve and Michelle. I know you've shared some before, so put you on the spot to think of others. But when you think of these workplaces, you talked about Capitol Hill and you brought us inside of that. Some other examples of what you've seen around workplaces really embracing this and maybe a tactic that they're using that's really working. And you're like, more people should do this. Tell us a story or two.
Well, I mentioned that others are doing this, that you don't have to invent it if you're considering it. And as a matter of fact, Pet Partners has a great guidebook on their website for companies that are thinking about being pet friendly. My favorite is Amazon. Amazon brings 6,000 dogs to work every day. And they're not just dogs, by the way, they're Puppazonians. Employees are Amazonians, they have Puppazonians. And so if they can do it at that scale, I think anybody can do it. And my other favorite story about Amazon is when you get a 404 error on their website, it's just pictures of employees' dogs.
Dogs, yes. And for some reason, that doesn't make me frustrated. If I get an error when I'm shopping or trying to do something, I'm like, really? The website's down? But when I see the dog that goes, uh-oh, I'm like, all right, it's okay. Again, going back to that disarming, cooling the situation and connecting us.
Totally. Think about some of the brands out there that from a marketing angle, there's a dog or a cat involved. I just know how I feel about those brands, the commercials. You're like, I'm normally annoyed by a commercial, but I like this one, so there's just so much when we think about, reflecting in our lives about the fun we're having and pets involved, the commercials we see, we can't argue. It just makes us feel better. And so why wouldn't we be bringing this and incorporating this more into the work we do in our culture? Let's, start to wrap up this episode on really how all this ties to mental health. The mental health of an individual, and companies today, more than ever, I think, I hope, are caring about the whole human, their mental health, that they're, getting what they need to be their best selves. Share some thoughts around just those direct connections and maybe some ideas from companies you see doing this really well to keep people well and healthy at work.
Well, I do want to. So it's interesting. You talked about brands. I think, brands that embrace pet friendliness will have an advantage both internally with their employees and externally. I think leaders, senior leaders who make pet friendliness part of their brand are going to be successful. And one of the reasons they're going to be successful is because it shows how they care about the whole employee. It shows how much they care about mental health. And it's the conversation starter. It's the natural way to really speak with employees about what matters to them. And I think showing care and concern for the employees is the job of every leader. And pets are just the key that unlocks so much of that.
One of the things we also talked about, we said a majority of employees own a pet, but the employees that don't own a pet, they actually have an appreciation for the reasons that Steve just talked about. They say, well, I don't own a pet, but I think it's really neat that the employer is looking holistically and not just, okay, the employee is a worker and they're a number, et cetera, but like what do the employees care about outside of work? And oftentimes that answer is my pet. And go into any office, you'll see pictures on their desk of pets. I mean, just survey your employees and ask how they would feel about a pet-friendly perk or allowing dogs into the office. Or if you can't do that, should we have a pet working event, a pet photo contest? Just incorporate pets into the conversation. And you will see a lot of attention, engagement, and to Steve's point, the mental health and well-being and appreciation that pets bring to our lives. It's phenomenal.
Yeah. So just reflecting back on some of the things that we shared today, we walk more. How easy is it to just sit at our desks and go at? I'm one of those people. I'm just in here, but I have a dog named Cardi, and she's sitting right over here, enjoying the conversation. And here in a little bit, I got to stand up, take a break, walk outside, get fresh air, right? Definitely healthy. I smile more, whether that is my dog Cardi or I'm looking at one of our channels with our team members about the goofy things. One of our pets that was just shared this week didn't want to move, so it was upside down, like in a stiff mode. It was just a funny capture of like, I'm not moving, I'm staying right here. And I chuckled, like I just had like a fun little laugh for that. I connect more with people, like I said, whether that's in my neighborhood or some of these pet working, exercise activities that we've talked about with Michelle. It helps people connect that might be very different, but we share a commonality, whether we both have pets or we just want to talk about that funny dog that was, upside down in the post or whatever. It helps us build relationships. And then, this kind of goes with the walking, but could be separate, and I think should be separate, taking breaks. A lot of us, we are guilty of just not taking healthy breaks, whether that's to move our bodies or just to get off the screen or do something different. And that doesn't have to always just be in our work lives, like taking those breaks and not being so maybe serious or, in the nitty gritty. So we could go on forever, but we don't have forever to record today. I just wanted to share some of those very healthy things that I think directly tie back to a lot of what we're talking about. Before we close out and wrap up today, Michelle, I'm going to make sure we are sending people to the best resource or, you as the contact or whatever we want to do to offer them today. Any closing comments for our amazing guest, Steve, before we head off, Steve?
Well, I really appreciate, and this is just these are the cliff notes of all of the amazing work that HABRI and Steve and team have done. If we could, can we add some links to the show notes? If people want to dive in, we tried to keep it pretty high level, but I just have I've been working with Steve and team for quite a while, and every time I think, okay, well, surely there's got to be a downside to pet ownership. Surely there has to be a downside to having a pet-friendly workplace, whatever that may look like. We haven't found it yet. So, Steve, I'll task you with that. Let's see if there's any downside other than, it can be quite costly to take care of a pet, but that's what we're here for. We're here to help offset and defray those costs. We're here to help raise awareness. And every time we talk to someone, we see light bulbs go off. There's usually some sort of action on incorporating pets into the workplace. Again, whatever that looks like for you as an employer. So thank you, Steve. Anything to add there?
Well, I'll just say we're so grateful for our partnership with Pet Partners. You're helping make our research work possible. We're very grateful for that. I think the Pet Partners website actually has some amazing resources, some practical resources for considering these issues. And come to HABRI.org if you want to dive into some of the science and learn about some of the work that we do. But so grateful for your partnership. And Nikki, thank you so much for having me on the show.
Yeah, awesome. This has been great. We will definitely link out to HABRI.org, OnePack Plan, more about Pet Partners and the great resources like the Dogs at Work guide that our team is so much loving and enjoying. And we will see you. Michelle and I will be back for another episode soon. So thanks so much, Steve, for joining us. We'll see you all next time. It was such a good episode today. Thank you to Steve for joining Michelle and I for this episode around how pet-friendly workplaces are boosting mental health. Gosh, there's so many stats that I feel like we didn't even cover or knowledge to tap into from Steve, but it was still a very packed episode. Lots of key takeaways. Here's my truth you can act on. Number one, there is a real science behind the pet and human bond. Interacting with pets boosts our oxytocin and it lowers cortisol. Pets directly support our mental, physical, and social health at home, at work, all the places. So why not have them around more? Number two, HR leaders love pets, but I think they're underestimating the impact. 90% of HR leaders are pet owners and 95% say, I would do whatever it takes for my pet. But there is a disconnect in how we are incorporating them into work. The actual number of total employees having pets in our workplaces is around 90%. But I think so often we have a disconnect around how many really would be interested in this and how would pets really fit in? And the answer is whether you have a pet or not, the data is showing us that we all get our cup filled from pets in our lives. So how do we incorporate more pets at work, pet policies, and cool things that we've been learning from our friends at Pet Partners? Number three, pet-friendly workplaces drive measurable results. So increase in team collaboration. We said pets help us build relationship and morale and engagement. Pets help us improve our health, more work-life balance, if you will, breaks, taking walks, having our stress relief with our pets, right? Number 4, pet perks aren't just nice to have, they're culture builders. So things like pet insurance, pet bereavement leave, pet concierge services, paternity, pet themed Slack channels, all of those things, they just build stronger culture and just more joy into our workday. And number 5, resistance comes from misconceptions. Pets aren't a distraction, they spark connection. They help us problem solve, they lessen our stress. And, we heard the story about Amazon bringing 6,000 dogs to work. This, what was it, Papa Pinoza? So cool. So there's so many opportunities to overcome those misconceptions because pets at work drive measurable results. So good. And Michelle and I will be back for another episode in this series. Thank you so much again to Steve for joining us today.
We just left the world a little bit better. Now, go do something with it.